Once again, it's Gabe Morales with Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. Today, I have a very special guest. I'm very honored to have her on the show. We talked together about a month ago in Tennessee at a Warden's Conference on the threat of transnational groups, and we are going to discuss a particular group today that she presented on. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Kimberly Yearwood. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. Yes, most definitely. So, Kimberly, tell us, where were you born and raised?
I was actually born in Oklahoma, but when I was 7 years old, I moved down to Portland, Texas, which is a little town right on the side of Corpus Christi across the Harbor Bridge. And I grew up there from 7 till I graduated high school.
And so then when you're growing up there in Oklahoma, were there any gangs around where you're growing up or criminal groups?
I'm sure there were, but I was so young, I didn't know. I was real lucky to have my whole family that was in law enforcement, uncles and such. So I grew up early on. It was huge respect for that. I had an uncle that was a major with Oklahoma City PD, CID unit. And I remember fondly seeing him in uniform. And my cousin was married to a police officer. So that was really neat to see growing up.
Okay, so they kept you out of trouble.
Oh, my mama kept me out of trouble.
All right, all right. Well, good for moms. All right. And then what did you do after high school?
After high school, I went into the Navy for 10 years. I was a Navy corpsman.
And then after your military career?
After a military career, I got out and I actually worked in the medical field at first and decided I had had enough of it. I had experienced a lot of things in the military, not so great things, and set by my mother as she passed away from ovarian cancer and kind of needed a break from it. And I'd always been very interested in law enforcement, thought it was interesting. But then I took a job with the railroad as a supervisor. And that put me up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where my law enforcement career started with Tulsa County Sheriff's Office. So I was very blessed to be there because that was a great agency, a lot of action up there, lots of gangs. Tulsa is, as they nickname it, Little LA. There's a lot of gang activity there and, drugs. So I was fortunate enough to do that. My sheriff selected me to be on the cold case task force and the background investigator for the whole agency. So I was lucky enough to do that. And it grew my knowledge of gangs and found it very interesting because I did not grow up like that at all. I didn't grow up on the hard sides of town. I grew up in upper middle class. So it was very interesting to me, to say the least, and hear their stories and how they grew up.
And so then I was going to ask you, why did you get in your line of work? But it sounds like that's why your family background and just you always had an interest in that. So you started working at the Collins County Sheriff's Office, correct, in Texas?
When I left Tulsa after a few years, I actually worked for the Colony Police Department for a few years. And then I came on over to Collin County. Worked here as a detention officer, left to go do some bodyguard service. And then I came back to Collin County and I run the detention intelligence unit now.
For people who don't know Texas, can you describe Collins County? Where is it located as far as where's the closest metropolitan cities?
Dallas, Fort Worth area. We are actually located in McKinney, which is kind of a suburb of Dallas. And it's extremely populated now. It is growing. This place is really growing and growing fast. We house probably close to 1,400 to 1,700 inmates of all socioeconomic backgrounds here. And it's a busy place, but very extremely well run.
And what kind of assignments have you had there at Collins County?
When I came back, I run the detention intelligence unit. So I've done that since I've been back.
And I understand also you have a fusion center there?
Yes, my office is located in North Texas Fusion Center, and I'll assist them on certain things. But primarily, the jail keeps me incredibly busy because not only do I do the gangs for the jail, I also do a lot of gang consultations with agencies throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth area and sometimes in Oklahoma as well. So that keeps me extremely busy. I teach classes. I'm a TCOL instructor, so I teach classes in gang tattoo and code recognition, as well as hate groups, as well as a introduction to Mexican cartels. And so that keeps me extremely busy.
Interesting. Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. We have a international criminal group that has, according to the press, invaded the United States. And as we all know, sometimes the media doesn't get it correct. I believe there's been some misinformation out there about this particular group. And so that's one of the main reasons why I asked you to come on the show. Can you tell us about Tren de Aragua and what it is and where did they start and how did they get up here?
Well, Tren de Aragua is a Venezuelan prison gang. It started in Tocaron prison in the state of Aragua in Venezuela. There was misconceptions at the beginning, as you know, with any new transnational gang, because it is new to us pretty much in the last few years. It's a constant learning thing. You have to get the right informants that will tell you information about them. But then you also know sometimes the gangs will lie to keep you off their path as well. So initially, it was said that it was a railroad union that kind of went rogue, and that's how they started. But no, it started in Tocaron prison in Venezuela. And they set up a prawn system in the prison, for lack of better words, the pod boss kind of thing. And so they started with that. And you had what they call the tres papas that kind of ran the program, that they made all the inmates pay a tax to them. And so that's how they built up the prison system there. As far as that prison, I mean, they had everything from zoos to discotheques to taquerias, all kinds of stuff. Then that prison paid by this tax that they had to pay to Tren de Aragua. The thing that is bad is the economy, as you know, in Venezuela is so bad since Maduro took office. And it was almost impossible for some families, they couldn't afford it, to pay this tax for their loved ones. So those people who didn't pay the tax for their loved ones, they had to live in the elements. They lived in subpar conditions all the time, while Tren de Aragua lived high on the hog, for lack of better words. I mean, all kinds of stuff was shipped in there, drugs, weapons, everything, until Maduro sent in the police and they went and broke up the prison, and some Tren de Aragua members escaped. Now, with COVID and everything going on and the economy getting so bad, that allowed Tren de Aragua to grow. And they pretty much did it like the cartel does. They win the hearts and minds of some of the people and supply them with stuff, and then they threaten them. So basically, Tren de Aragua, otherwise known as TDA, they made it hard for their own people, and they would extort their own people, their fellow Venezuelans. And then, you know, they went over the border. They've gone to 11 different countries: Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, now the US. So that's how they grew. And they set up shop in different kinds of illegal activity in these different countries.
Well, you are one of the few people that I know, and I know a lot of people in law enforcement and corrections across the United States that has actually interviewed some of these individuals. So we are getting firsthand information here, ladies and gentlemen. Biggest expert in the United States, in my opinion, on TDA. Thank you for schooling us on that. So if I understand you right, they did not start on the outside as a railroad union and then went into prison as a gang. They were a prison gang that then went out to the streets.
Correct.
And then I did hear about that escape too. Do you believe that they had assistance with law enforcement? Did they
Oh,
pay off
yes.
some people like the drug cartels in Mexico do sometimes too? And they call it an escape when actually they helped them get out?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. It's been proven that they have certain people on roles, per se, even as far as the administration. So that is currently in control. What has made it so hard is that Maduro would not accept any of them back to be deported back to Venezuela, but now they are able to. So that will help us get them out of the United States.
You and I had talked about it in Nashville, how I saw that situation very similar to what Castro did with the Marilitos
Mm-hmm.
many years ago. If any of our viewers remember the Marilitos, and was a they call it a Cuban crime wave. Of course, not all Cubans are criminals, just like not all Venezuelans are
Exactly.
criminals. But there are some, a select few, that can cause a lot of damage. And that is what appears to be what we're seeing with TDA today in America, correct?
Correct. They are really into the human trafficking and sex trafficking. That is their bread and butter, as well as a drug called 2C. It's the pink cocaine. But they're very discerning, I should say, about who they work with. It's usually people within their own community. So they know who is fake and who's not. They know who belongs there, who doesn't. So they're very discerning in those ways and very wise in those ways. So that's the bad thing about them.
So what I hear you saying is we have intelligence watching them, but they have counterintelligence watching us and how we operate and how they can get away with things maybe better, testing our system. I was just going to ask you, what kind of security threats do they pose? And of course, human trafficking is
Oh,
one, and
that's the
drug
big one.
trafficking would be one. What other kinds of things, crimes have we noticed that they have been committing here in the United States?
They also tend to extort from their own people. They will take over an apartment complex like the one that they had in Colorado recently. And I believe that apartment complex has closed down since then, but they took that over. And I mean, that was very real. What they'll do is they'll take it over and then they'll demand that the families that live there pay them the tax, and they set rules and everything for that apartment complex. If somebody doesn't abide by that rule, then they get a rude awakening from TDA members saying, why didn't you abide by the rule? And that's when they'll beat them up, kill them, whatever they might do.
It almost sounds like they hold them hostage in their own living quarters and then assault them, torture them, intimidate them until they pay up.
Yeah, that
Terrible.
was par for their course, what they did at that apartment complex in Colorado.
I mean, that's just one well-known example in the media.
Right.
I'm sure it's going on in other places. So thank you for sharing that with us. What would you say, Kimberly, are some of your greatest accomplishments in your life and career?
Some cases I've solved that are near and dear to my heart. Working on the cold case unit, I had a girl that I was able to get identified. They found her skeleton. So, thanks to modern day DNA, they were able to identify her. I would say my military time was so special to me. Friendships you'll never lose. But, my biggest accomplishment is just working cases and identifying people, changing gang members' way of thinking, getting them on the right path, saying a word of encouragement to them that gets them thinking. That's probably my greatest accomplishment because those things mean everything to me.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of things right. As most of us have experienced, there's highs and there's lows. What would you say are some of the biggest hurdles that you have faced in your life and career?
I think the biggest hurdle is yes, I'm a detention officer, but I'm no dummy. And it's getting people to listen when you find something that is bigger, and that once it's starting to get investigated, it will be a bigger thing or a bigger case, is getting people to listen. I think that's my biggest hurdle. You've got to make time for stuff, and getting people to listen sometimes is frustrating because they have another caseload they're working on. I think that was probably be the most frustrating thing. Or, in cold case, it was the toughest thing because you knew one person had the key to solve that case and they had passed away. So you couldn't. It's time is your biggest obstacle on a lot of things. Time is the biggest obstacle on about everything, because you never know in this line of work, in this dangerous living of gangs and what's going on in the world. You just don't know if a person's going to be there tomorrow. So you've got to get a hold of them today. Time is the biggest obstacle.
Yes, I heard you say a lot of times people don't realize, at least at the time, how serious something is and don't understand the need for expediency
Mhm.
sometimes, that you're losing time. The longer you let an individual get away with things, the more potential victims are out there. Or, like you said, the trail could become cold and may never be solved. So
Mhm. It's
thank you.
frustrating because I've learned at an older age, I've learned that just because I find it of utmost importance, it might not be of utmost importance to other people.
Right.
So I have to understand that. And that's something that's tough to understand.
I'm sure sometimes it takes patience, but you just keep on trying to get them to understand, maybe give them, tell them a different way. Uh, Sometimes I found, yeah, seems to be a lack of communication. I keep on saying the same thing over and over, but they don't get it. Maybe if I try saying it a different way, and then maybe it'll make sense, or maybe have somebody else tell them. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes there's a block there, a communication block. I'm not sure why, but that happens in not just our business, but I think pretty much with human beings sometimes get over that
Right.
hump, that communication hump. Well, thank you
Yes.
for that. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
No, I will say that ICE has been doing a great. I have watched them and they are working so hard, 24 hours a day to get these illegal criminals out of our country. And I have seen them make wonderful leaps in progress with what they're doing now. I've seen them get some real bad guys out of the country, TDA and other gangs, transnational gangs, and they are just knocking it out of the park and doing a great job. I can't say enough about ICE working with the FBI, working with other agencies to get what needs to be done to keep us safe. They really are doing a great job. And I think they deserve that kudo because TDA has the chance to grow, and that's how they infiltrate is in a 3-stage system. And the last stage is turning cops and getting people that are in powerful positions to go the bad way. And there's no links they won't go to do it. So they're doing a great service for us, getting some of these really bad characters out. And now that Venezuela is taking them back, that's great. They're doing a good job.
Well, thank you for that. And yes, we should thank ICE, the FBI, the ATF, DOJ. All those guys sometimes get a bad rap, but I believe most of them are trying to do the right thing,
Right.
as well as our local law enforcement, corrections, as well as police officers and everybody else in the system. That's why we all can sleep well at night, is
Mhm.
they're all protecting us as well as protecting Americans' rights. So, there's been a lot of flack towards those people, but I believe most of them want to do the right thing. They all have families
Right.
too, and they don't want to see their families hurt either and want to see our community safer. So thank you for sharing that. And I also will have Kimberly's contacts at the end of this. She does give excellent presentations. I just heard her in Nashville, as I said. She is the person that I consider to be the number one expert right now in TDA in the United States. So if you want to know more about them, she has a lot more to share in her presentations, and I highly recommend her for your agencies and communities. Thank you, Kimberly.
Good to
Hopefully,
see
we'll see
you.
you again soon.
Bye.
Okay. Bye bye. Aloha.